Okay, sorry, I had to break this into two quick videos. Where we left off in the last video is we had this weird thing where all of a sudden our table was no longer populating after we forced the user to add a password. And looking at the message we got, it was null, which wasn't a very descriptive message. Usually when you use the get message with an exception, you get something a little more verbose. Null on its own wasn't quite enough. So one of the things we could do is we could say, well, just print out the exception. And if we do that, what we see is we got a null pointer exception, which is a little more specific. And we can see that we've loaded 8 volunteers. But when we go to our table, sorry, let me just go to Workbench here. If we go to our table, we load it, what we see is we have 8 volunteers that have a password. And then the last volunteer here does not have a password. So what's happening is when we go to load our volunteers into the table, under the results set, it says get the string for the column called password. Well, there's no password there, it's null. So it returns a null value instead of a string. So what's actually happening is right here, we're generating a null pointer exception. So now we need to figure out, how does that happen? Why is that? So we need to look back at where we were setting the volunteer's password. So go back to the volunteer class. And in here, we look through our constructor. We pass in a string with the password. And we call all our methods for setting first name, last name, phone number, birthday. This has all worked well before. We've created our result. And then we set our password is equal to, and then we use our password generator. And we get this SHA 512 password using whatever was passed in by the user and a salt. Now, the one thing that we're not doing here is we're not referring to the instance variable password. What we're actually doing is referring to our argument. So what I need to do, because they have the exact same name, they're going to say this password. Now, when we go to load it, it will actually set this password, and then when we insert into the database, it will read from this instance variable. So let me go back into, let me just go back into our code here, and we'll go back to our volunteer table. Sorry, let's go into our database, and I'm just going to delete that last volunteer from the database. I could either delete them or I could, give them an actual password, but we'll delete them for now. And then when we run this, that volunteer is gone, and it will load our table for us. And if we create a new volunteer, tester, test, and let's put in a password like simple, save. Now that tester's there, it's in our database, and if we go to check them out in our database, that last tester, now we can see the person's been saved and has the encrypted password. So there you have it. So that's how we can now create a user. Now let's test it with the other scenario, which is creating a new volunteer, and we're going to change the image. Okay, let's hit save. And now, hopefully, we'll see that new tester. And if we go back to edit, we have the changed image. And if we look in the database, we see they too have an encrypted password. I use the same one, simple and simple, but you can see in the database, because they have different salts, we have two different values here. So there we go. We're able to create a user with an encrypted password. In the next video, what we're going to do is we'll look at creating a login screen where we validate this password. Cheers for now.